Vince Gill has never chased attention, yet his voice has followed people through some of their most emotional moments. From wedding dances to funeral pews, his music has lived where words often fail. With more than 22 Grammy Awards and decades of respect across genres, Gill's legacy rests not on spectacle, but sincerity. Songs like Go Rest High on That Mountain resonate because they feel lived in, shaped by experience rather than ambition. Behind the calm smile and gentle tenor lies a life marked by loss, restraint, and difficult choices that quietly informed his artistry. Gill has never presented himself as untouchable or heroic. Instead, he has offered honesty, even when it exposed vulnerability. As the years passed, fans learned that his softness was not weakness, but strength forged through grief, patience, and devotion. The man behind the music carries stories that explain why his songs don't just entertain. They comfort because they come from a place of deep understanding and earned compassion. Childhood, interrupted by a living loss. In 1968, Vince Gill was an 11-year-old boy growing up in Norman, Oklahoma, surrounded by family, music, and routine comfort. His father, a federal judge who loved music, nurtured Vince's early talent, often playing alongside him. That stable world shattered when Vince's older half-brother, Bob Cohen, was involved in a devastating car accident. Bob survived, but the injuries caused severe, permanent brain damage, leaving him unable to speak or care for himself. After months in a coma, he returned physically present, but emotionally unreachable. For Vince, the loss was confusing and profound. Bob was alive, yet gone, a reality that haunted the household. Watching his parents grieve in silence shaped Vince's emotional awareness early. That experience planted a sensitivity that would later surface in his songwriting. Bob lived another 25 years in that condition, and the quiet sorrow of that long goodbye stayed with Vince, teaching him how deeply absence can echo even in full rooms, turning grief into song. When Bob passed away in 1993, Vince Gill was already an established artist, but success did not shield him from reopening old wounds. That same year, he released a Christmas album featuring It Won't Be the Same This Year, a song heavy with personal meaning. Rather than writing about sudden loss, Gill captured the ache of prolonged absence, the kind that begins long before death. The song reflected years of emotional processing that started in childhood and never fully resolved. Vince later shared that every performance of the song brings him back to being that confused 11-year-old boy, trying to understand why someone he loved was still there, but unreachable. This honesty became a defining trait in his music. He never dramatized pain, he honored it quietly. That approach gave his songs a timeless quality, allowing listeners to find their own stories inside his lyrics. Grief, for Gill, wasn't something to escape. It became something to translate into healing sound. Walking away from the obvious dream. By the late 1980s, Vince Gill was respected in Nashville, but not yet a star. His talent was undeniable, yet commercial success remained elusive. Then came an offer that could have changed everything overnight. Mark Knopfler invited him to join Dire Straits at the height of their global fame. Stadium tours, international recognition, and financial security were all guaranteed. Gill hesitated and declined. The decision wasn't rooted in ego or fear, but identity. He knew joining would mean abandoning his own voice before it had fully formed. Turning it down led to years of uncertainty, smaller venues, and quiet doubt. But Gill trusted his instincts. Soon after, When I Call Your Name was released, earning him his first Grammy and redefining his career. The success felt earned because it aligned with who he truly was. Walking away from instant fame allowed him to walk towards something more meaningful. Authenticity that could last beyond trends and applause. Love that challenged public expectations. Vince Gill's relationship with Amy Grant began not with scandal, but kindness. During a 1993 holiday special, he noticed her tension and offered simple reassurance. That moment sparked a connection rooted in empathy rather than attraction alone. Over time, their paths crossed professionally, and their musical chemistry became undeniable. Both were married and both struggled privately within those relationships. They maintained boundaries, but public speculation grew as their marriages ended years apart. The narrative quickly turned harsh, particularly toward Amy, whose faith-based career invited intense scrutiny. Radio stations distanced themselves, and fans felt betrayed. Vince absorbed the judgment quietly, never feeding controversy. When they finally married in 2000, it wasn't a declaration, it was a resolution. Their ceremony was intimate, focused on commitment rather than validation. Gill has always maintained that their story was not reckless, but human. Their love endured not because it was easy, but because it was patient, honest, and ultimately rooted in mutual respect rather than public approval, stepping into a legend's shadow. When Glenn Frey passed away in 2016, it seemed impossible for the Eagles to continue. The band represented an era, and Frey was central to its identity. Yet Vince Gill was invited to help carry that legacy forward. The choice surprised some fans, but Gill approached it with humility. He didn't aim to replace Frey, he aimed to honor him. Alongside Frey's son, Deacon, Gill studied the band's sound meticulously, blending his voice into harmonies without imposing his own style. When he took the stage in 2017, the response was overwhelming. Audiences weren't resistant, they were grateful. Gill understood how to serve the song rather than himself. While some critics debated the band's evolution, Gill stayed silent, focused on respect and continuity. His presence proved that reverence and restraint can coexist with excellence. Joining the Eagles wasn't a reinvention, it was an act of stewardship, preserving music that meant everything to millions. Love tested by illness and devotion. Life tested Vince Gill's steadiness again when Amy Grant faced serious health crises. In 2020, she underwent open-heart surgery for a rare congenital condition, a journey complicated by pandemic restrictions that initially kept Vince away. When he was finally allowed in, he became her anchor, setting aside work without hesitation. 2 years later, Amy suffered a traumatic brain injury after a cycling accident, leading to memory and balance challenges. Vince canceled concerts immediately, choosing presence over performance. He became caregiver, advocate, and constant reassurance. These moments revealed the depth of his devotion, not as a public figure, but as a partner. Songs like "When My Amy Prays" gained renewed meaning, reflecting lived experience rather than sentiment. Through uncertainty and fear, Vince remained grounded, proving that love isn't demonstrated through grand gestures, but through consistency. His response to crisis showed that his quiet strength wasn't learned on stage, it was forged in everyday acts of care. Creating with purpose, not pressure. In his late 60s, Vince Gill continues writing, not for charts, but for truth. He has embraced a phase of creativity rooted in reflection rather than ambition. Songs like "Forever Changed" show his willingness to address difficult subjects with empathy, giving voice to stories often left unspoken. Gill doesn't write to provoke or impress, he writes to connect. He collaborates with younger artists, listens more than he speaks, and finds joy in simply playing. Awards no longer define success, meaning does. His music now feels like conversation rather than performance, offering understanding instead of answers. Gill has proven that artistry doesn't fade with age, it deepens. By choosing authenticity over relevance, he continues to matter. His legacy isn't built on noise, but nuance. Through loss, love, and quiet resilience, Vince Gill shows that some voices endure not because they are loud, but because they are true, and they stay with you long after the song ends.